Hello everyone, Berserkhead here, and welcome to this new series that I'm starting that I've actually wanted to do for quite a long time. So basically, I've always wanted to have a segment on my channel where I talk about real life stuff. I go away from history and video games that are topics that I talk about on my channel usually, and I just talk about something totally different because I like to talk about those things and I never have the chance to do it with the videos that I make. So I was like, why not make a segment where I just talk about, anything but, video games and history. Why not do that? And yeah, I want to do that every now and then because I really feel like it sometimes. And this is a great way to do it. And I guess I'm going to be making some of those, one of those videos every now and then. The footage you're seeing in the background is Euro Truck Simulator 2, which is, in my opinion, the best background game, because, it's not exciting. I mean, you can't really let's play a game like that without talking about something totally different, because let's face it, it's just boring to watch it. But it's great for background because it doesn't take too much of your attention, and, it's just one of those games. You can watch it and listen to something totally different, and it makes sense. So I guess that's the game that I'm going to be using for when I make those videos. If you don't like it, you can just minimize it and listen to what I'm saying. That's another good way of watching this video. But why am I saying all of this? Why am I telling you how to watch this video? Just do whatever the fuck you want. Anyways, today I'm going to be talking about stereotypes, generalization, and fruitless assumptions about people. Why did I decide to do that in the first episode? Because it's something that I have a lot of experience with, I guess. It's just something that's sort of personal to me, and I feel like I can talk about this topic for a very long time, which I'll try and not do. Granted, I don't want to make like a 40-minute video, but it's a topic that I can talk about a lot. Okay, so let's start. So what's the difference between a stereotype and a generalization? According to me, at least, there's something that I've always said about stereotypes that I still believe it's true. Stereotypes they do exist for a reason. They do have a certain amount of truth behind them. They do originate from somewhere, and they do have a basis in reality, right? So they're not an infinitely bad thing. They're not an ultimately bad thing, is what I'm trying to say. You can use them for good. Like, granted, they're good stereotypes, but you can generally use them for good. For example, you can like gain an impression about something, or like a very general image of something based on stereotypes. They're all around us, so they do influence us in a certain way. And I believe that if you just understand why they exist and you understand how to use them, you can, they can be a good thing. However, the difference between a stereotype and a generalization is that I believe that a generalization is something that is ultimately bad. And why am I saying that? Because there are a lot of different things and different people in the world. And if you generalize a certain group based on just one thing, that's always going to be a bad thing, because there's always an exception to the rule, at least in real life. Like in science, there are rules that are just set in stone. There are no exceptions to them. But in real life, there is always an exception to the rule. At least in the vast majority of cases, there are always going to be exceptions. So that's why I believe that if you generalize a lot, you're kind of a close-minded person. So again, you could believe certain stereotypes, but as long as you don't generalize, I believe that that's a good thing. Again, believing in stereotypes is not a bad thing, because once again, they do have a basis in reality. But if you generalize everything based on a stereotype, then you're doing something bad. I mean, that's kind of why racism and all of those bad things, it kind of exists nowadays. So for example, I myself, I don't consider myself racist in any way, shape, or form. But let's say I were. So, I could say, like, I hate all black people because they do this and that, and, they're undereducated, or, they steal or whatever. Let me give you a more personal example, okay? Something that's more personal to me. So I'm Bulgarian, right? And I live in Bulgaria, and I can say I'm racist towards all gypsies because they're poor, they don't pay taxes, they cause a bunch of problems, and they steal, right? Which those are all stereotypes about Bulgarian gypsies that have a basis in reality. It's true that a lot of them do those things. However, as long as I'm not generalizing, that's not a bad thing, because once again, those things are true for some people, but it makes me a real, a bad person only if I start discriminating people based on the fact that they're gypsies and those bad stereotypes exist about gypsies. So let me give you an example, okay? Another example that I'm gonna give you. So I know a lot of people in my country that would just be, hey, I hate gypsies, I don't want to go near gypsies, and that's just how it is, and I'm not gonna do anything with gypsies. And you ask them, okay, say you met this person, right? He's like really nice, he's a really good person, like you could be good friends with him, but he's a gypsy. Would you be friend with him? And they're like, no, I wouldn't. Why? Because he's a gypsy and all those stereotypes exist, but they're not true for this person. And why wouldn't you be friends with him? Well, he's a gypsy. That's a generalization, and that's why it makes you a closed-minded person, because you generalize and you apply those stereotypes to all people that are within the stereotype, which you shouldn't do. And that's kind of why racism exists nowadays. Racism historically came from a totally different place. I don't want to go into it because, once again, I don't want to talk about too much history in this series. But yes, it existed in history, right? And people are racist nowadays for like different reasons. Granted, they don't want to be slave owners because slavery is not legal anymore. But there's racism simply because of generalization. You just say, I hate black people because all black people are bad, and you are not willing to see that there are exceptions. Even if you consider like the majority of black people like bad, why would you say like all of them are black and I'm gonna discriminate them based on the fact that they're black? You can dislike them based on who they are as people. Like, you see this person and you're like, oh yeah, I don't like him because of this and this and that, but you can say I don't like him because he's black, because that's a generalization. You don't know anything about this person. So unless you know all black people or all gypsies in the world, you can say I hate black people or I hate gypsies, because that makes you a very close-minded person. So that's why I don't believe that people should use generalization, and we should try and generalize as less as possible, because it only leads to bad things. Why should we be open-minded? That's a good question. Why should we be open-minded and not say those things and not generalize? Because no one really favors from it, because there are a lot of bad stereotypes about Bulgarian people, and I've met some xenophobia myself, because I say like, hey, I'm from Bulgaria, and they're like, oh, you're a fucking gypsy, you want to steal all my stuff, and you're poor and all those things. I'm not any of those things, in fact, but it just exists because, once again, people generalize and they're very close-minded, and they're not open-minded enough to see who I am as a person. And that discriminates me, which makes me feel bad. And how's that bad for them, you might ask? Well, it's bad because, being a close-minded person, you close yourself in. It's the more open-minded you are, the more things you're gonna experience and the more people you're gonna meet. And I'm not one of those people that's gonna go and say like, oh, you should meet many people because you might find friends or whatever. But being close-minded is not a good thing. It just limits you. It just limits who you are, and it just limits everything around you, which is generally not a good thing. Okay, so that's what I can say about generalization and stereotypes. And how about fruitless assumptions? Let me give you some personal experience. I gave you a personal experience with stereotypes. I experienced this quite often. Sometimes I would just say, when people ask me where are you from, I'll just say guess, and I'll not tell them, because I know that there are a lot of people who would say, "Oh, you're Bulgarian. I don't like Bulgarian people. Like, who the fuck are you?" You know, and I don't like that, and I experienced that. But how about assumptions? So let's say the most common thing that I experience is people making assumptions about me based on the way I look, and that's something that I experience even more often. And it's even worse, at least for me, in my own experience. So you've seen me in a few of my videos. How do I look? I in my daily life, I wear a lot of black, and I have long hair, and I'm generally sort of a you know I'm not the most energetic and excited person that you're gonna see. So people make a lot of assumptions about me. Wow, just incredible. The first assumption that they make about me is that I am a metalhead. Now let me define the term metalhead and the way that I use it. I wouldn't use the word metalhead for someone who simply listens to metal music. And yes, it's true, I do like metal music. I used to play the guitar, I used to play in a band, and in fact, I used to be a metalhead. But let me give you an example about what I think is a metalhead. A metalhead is not only someone who listens to metal music, but that's someone whose life revolves around metal music. And a lot of metalheads, they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I hate this, I hate pop culture, I hate pop music, I hate people, I hate everything, but metal's so great, like that's the best thing in the world." And I would know because I used to be one of those people. In fact, a few years back, I was like that. I was like, I only listen to metal music, everything else is shit, and I hate pop culture because people are stupid. And I was really close-minded as a result of that. So that's why I don't like being classified as a metalhead, because to me, to be a metalhead means all of those things. Granted, some people would say, that's not the meaning of the word, in the way I see it. But that is it for me, and that's why I don't like, being when people assume that I'm one of those people. And sometimes I would be just walking down the street, the way I usually am, and people, I would see those metalheads that are clearly metalheads. Granted, I'm making assumptions about them, but sometimes they're people that I know, that I know about. I don't know them personally, but they will look at me and they will be like, "Oh yeah, you're one of us." Like they just have this look, like, "Oh yeah, you're one of us, man. That's so cool." And I'm not. And I've experienced this, not only them, but when I meet new people, for example, the first thing they ask me is, "What music do you listen to?" And I don't like that. I don't like that because music is not a major part of my life. Granted, I of course I listen to music, but the answer that they expect is that I'm gonna say like, "Oh yeah, man, I listen to extreme death metal, like that's the best thing in the world." And it's sometimes really annoying. So and it happens all the time. It happens all the time. And for example, when I went to take my IELTS certificate, so part of the like you have speaking, writing, listening, and reading. And when I went to my speaking, is basically they first of all, before they ask you, questions, you gotta give them an interview basically. And the first thing they asked me in the interview is basically the questions that they asked me were, what music do you listen to? Do you play an instrument? And is there a particular genre of music that you hate? And I hate that because they just see the way I look and they assume that those are major things about my life. And that's why they ask me, because they just make this assumption once again that I'm a metalhead, and they and that I hate everything, and that I mean the fact that the question, "Do you hate a particular genre of music?" was in there is a clear evidence that they assume that I'm a metalhead. And it happens all the time. Like, we're doing the yearbook, and there was this photographer, and the first thing was like, "Oh yeah, you wake up with Sepultura, don't you?" No, I don't. In fact, I'm really far away from that. First of all, metal is not the only music that I listen to. I mean, I listen to all sorts of music, like, and I don't see anything wrong with it. Like, what's wrong with listening to Amon Amarth and Taylor Swift and Ed Sheeran at the same time? I don't see anything bad with it. And that's why I don't like when people make assumptions about me, because one, those assumptions that people make about me are most of the time wrong, and I don't fit into too many stereotypes that people, label me with. And second of all, because they're always like, oh yeah, when they want to have like a conversation with me, they're like, oh yeah, I want to have a conversation with this guy, so let's talk about music. I don't like talking about music. But okay, let me give you an example as to why you should be more open-minded from my personal experience. Let's get an example of when I was, when I was making assumptions about people, and when I was generalizing and I thought that stereotypes are true about everyone. So ever since I can remember, I don't know if I was raised that way or where I got this information from, but I dislike Turkish people. It's a normal thing. It's a normal thing in my country. You're raised with it. Like, Bulgaria is a very xenophobic country in the most true sense of the word. They hate different people, and that might be one of the reasons why I'm experiencing so many frivolous assumptions and generalizations about me. But they don't like different people, and there's a little bit of tensions between the different cultures, like Bulgarians, Turks, Gypsies, Romanians, Russians. You'll find a Bulgarian person hating every single nation on earth. Like, even cultures that are not that present over here, like Americans, for example, you find so many people hating Americans for all sorts of different reasons. But yeah, there's I guess, a special thing for Turkish people in Bulgaria. It's like, we're raised from this mentality that the Turks cause like so many problems to our country, and we have Turkish people trying to invade our country, and Turkish culture trying to invade our culture. And granted, they have a political party that are doing some pretty nasty things, but there's this generalization that not only Turks that live in Bulgaria are bad, but like Turks that live in Turkey, they also want like to restore the empire. I mean, granted, once again, that's a stereotype that has a basis in history, because I'm sure that they had a guy who was like their prime minister or like their president that was really traditionalist, and he really wanted to restore the Ottoman Empire a few years ago. I've heard about it. It doesn't matter. Don't really care. But yeah, the first time I've been to Turkey twice, and the first time I went to Turkey, I went with this mentality. I was like, I'm kind of scared to go there because Turkey is like so much different. Like, they're so more conservative, and I don't look like a person that would fit in, with my dark clothes and all stuff like that, and people would probably look at me in a really weird way, right? So I went there with this assumption, and that was the first thing that I noticed. Like, all the things that I've heard about Turkey and Turkish people are just wrong. I mean, when I went to Istanbul, you see all sorts of people in there. I mean, granted, you see the people that wear like traditional clothing. Once again, it's a stereotype. It's got a basis in reality. And yes, those people exist, like extremely conservative Muslim Turkish people. But I saw also all sorts of people in there. I saw gamers, hipsters, skaters. I saw all sorts of people in there, and that's when I realized that this stereotype is just not true. And the second time I went to Turkey, I actually started liking Turkish people, because the first time I was there, I saw the country, some of the myths that I had about it were busted. But the second time when I went to Turkey and when I actually met Turkish people, this is when everything just totally flipped. Like, my impression about Turkey just totally changed from that moment, because it was like a school project. So we're like a bunch of classmates that were like sent to Turkey to like, I don't know, I don't even know why we were there, but it was a project. They were doing something and they sent us to the school, and they were basically showing us the school. So we met a few students in there, and I still thought that Turkish people were generally more conservative than people in my country, or like people in West Europe and all the other countries that I've been to. And but then we met those Turkish people, and they were some of the nicest people I've ever met. That's I'm gonna be honest with you. They were just the nicest people I ever met. We just met them. They barely spoke English. That's one of the things. We kind of had a translator who spoke Turkish and Bulgarian fluently, but we're like more than 20 people, and we've only got one translator. So communicating with them was really hard, and it was hard for like both sides. But they were like, oh no guys, you're our guests, so we gotta take you to like a place somewhere, and we gotta basically treat you like guests. So we went to this it was like a night cafe is the way I would classify. It's like a cafe, but it's also open during the night. So we just went there, and I just realized how this assumption about Turkish people that I had in my mind is just totally wrong, because they weren't conservative. They were just people like us, you know, girls, boys hanging out, all that stuff. And they were just really friendly, and they wanted to talk to us. And you know, this myth was just totally busted. Even like the thing with that they want to restore the Ottoman Empire or something. There was like we were playing backgammon or chess or something like that, and there was this box that was like Ottoman style, and there was like a painting on it that was like depicting the Ottoman Turks. And there was this guy, and he just pulls it out, and he's like, "That's Ottoman style. Do you like it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you know, it's beautiful, but we have a thing with the Ottomans, so don't really like it." I don't know why I said that, but I just said it. And the guy was like, "Oh man, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." So he just pulled it away. It was just like, "Yeah, you don't need that." And it just proved me totally wrong. And that's why I believe that people are, you know, people should be more open-minded. That's basically my whole conclusion about this whole thing. Should be more open-minded, because you shouldn't generalize. It doesn't favor anyone. It's not good for you. It's not good for the people that you're generalizing. And you could be wrong in a lot of cases, and the less you generalize, the less wrong you're gonna be. So I guess that's gonna be it for this video. It's just a rant. That's what I want to do. I just want to talk about something. Like, give me, I mean, if you want, just give me some feedback. Tell me, do you agree with me? I mean, granted, there are always going to be people that disagree with whatever you say. That's the internet. That's totally the normal thing. So yeah, tell me if you agree with me, and give me some feedback. Did you enjoy the video? And yeah, I guess that's gonna be it. And I'm gonna be making some of those every now and then, because I feel like it. That's the only reason. So yeah, that's gonna be it. And I'll see you next time. Goodbye.